I think we've seen on full display here the extent to which corporate Canada is disconnected and frankly arrogant. The sheer audacity to come before this committee, complain that refusing to show up until the end of May isn't avoiding accountability, and then insisting that more support from government is necessary while millions of Canadians are struggling and thousands of your workers are laid off, boggles the mind. But let's take a moment to look at the facts, not the ones on the Facts Matter website, combating fake news. And I have a copy here, especially point number 10, directed at us, members of the committee, clarifying why you told us it would take almost three months for you to show up here. The reality is that government regulates your industry, both in terms of broadcasting and telecommunications. And this committee oversees that work. We were clear, and we have been clear, that you needed to be here much sooner. So let's get to the main issues of today. Over an 8-month period, Bell eliminated 6,000 jobs, including February's announcement of 4,800 job cuts. At the same time, you announced an increase in dividend checks for shareholders. You claim that Bell was forced into the decision to fire so many workers because the federal government has been slow to deliver help. You've been quoted as saying, "We continue to face a difficult economy and government and regulatory decisions that undermine investment in our networks, fail to support our media business in a time of crisis." A time of crisis. Where I come from, a crisis is wildfires, is thousands of people losing their jobs, kind of like the ones that used to work for Bell Media that you fired. Who's in crisis, Mr. Bibic? You, with your millions of dollars of compensation, or the workers you just fired?
So, Chair, my pleasure to answer those questions. I keenly wanted to be before this committee on March 19th, and I had committed that. In fact, I would be in front of Indu on March 18th, and it's the committee that rescheduled my appearance, and I'm here, and I always am eager to have a public policy discourse, as I mentioned earlier. Again, with respect to dividends, these dividends.
My question is about the crisis. Who's in crisis? Is it you or the workers, the thousands of workers that you laid off?
What's undeniable is that the Canadian media ecosystem is in crisis, and one can only need to ask Post Media and Saltwire and print journalism in the country and our direct traditional media competitors.
Thank you, Mr. Bibic. I think it would be good to hear from, we've all heard from Bell Media workers that have lost their jobs, and I think it's pretty clear that they're the ones facing the crisis. Your board recently gave you a 20% raise. If you truly feel for the thousands of workers you laid off, would you consider taking 9% reduction in your own salary?
As I mentioned earlier, the
so yes or no?
have been thinned out significantly since I became CEO. So because we're always vigilant around costs and around the number of executives we have, and that's resulted in a 40% decrease in compensation.
I take that. Oligopolies like Bell's are hurting Canadians. Nowhere is that more evident than in my province of Manitoba. In 2017, we were told that Bell buying out MTS would bring in better rates and service. With the Liberals' approval, you spent $3.9 billion to purchase Manitoba Telecom Services, a company that was at one time proudly publicly owned. Not only have our rates gone up, the quality of the service has gone down, no doubt linked to the fact that you cut over 45% of the Manitoba workforce. This reality is clear in our region. Here I have a picture shared by my constituent, Suzanne Sinclair, who lives in Dallas. She's forced to use a walkie-talkie to communicate with her 89-year-old veteran father who lives down the road because Bell MTS's landlines don't work in their community. Why? Because Bell MTS refuses to do the maintenance required. Landlines that belong to Bell MTS in Canada in 2024. But perhaps the most egregious example of the way in which Bell MTS has taken Manitobans for granted is Bloodvein First Nation, that was in communication with Bell MTS about setting up and operating a cell phone tower for a number of months starting in 2020. A year later, when the wildfires of 2021 hit the region, the First Nation asked to work with Bell urgently. At this point, they had built a cell phone tower. They had the equipment set up. All they needed from Bell was to turn on a switch and get the cell phones working. As the wildfires raged and multiple communities were evacuated, including theirs, the smoke engulfed Winnipeg and reached southern Ontario. Bell MTS told Bloodvein they had to pay $652,000 to turn a switch and get self-service to a community that was 8 miles from a burning wildfire. Self-service that could help lives. Oligopolies like yours have failed Manitobans, First Nations, workers, and Canadians across the board. Do you find it acceptable that your company rejected Bloodvein's requests at a time of real crisis? Will you work with them to get them self-service?
Madam Chair, we'll communicate with the clerk to get the information as it relates to that specific situation, as well as the customer to which the honourable member referred to. And as far as Bell's investments in Manitoba, we made a commitment when we acquired MTS to invest at least $1 billion, and I'm proud to say we invested well above that, and that it's allowed us to build fibre to the home networks in Churchill, in Flin Flon, in LaSalle, in Morden.
Mr. Bibic, I think the questions that we've raised here are ones of real crisis, and I'm disappointed I haven't heard your intent to work with Bloodvein and get them cell service. And let me move to the question on cell phone rates. Canadians pay some of the highest cell phone rates in the world, and my question is, what will you do to cut down cell phone rates at a time when you and your fellow CEOs are making $62 million in profits?
Madam Chair, very quickly on that, I'd encourage all members to review the transcripts of our appearance at Indu on March 18th, and we categorically laid out the facts showing that our pricing is very competitive, has declined dramatically, and the premise of the question no longer holds. It may have perhaps at some point in time many years ago, and our wireless pricing is lower than in the United States.
Mr. Bibic.
When Canadians heard you were coming to Parliament, Mr. Bibic, we got flooded with messages. Among them, I received a heartbreaking letter from someone whose parents lost their jobs with a company Bell recently bought. After working there for over 30 years, in their 50s, and their financial security has been ripped apart. The young person wrote, "My parents' work supported the company's growth for years, and now they've been left with not even a minimum settlement package required by law to allow us to secure our house and our finances. Now we are faced with financial uncertainty. I will have to delay my studies to help my family until my parents find a secure position. I hope that you will take Bell to task on their unethical business practices. We live in fear, uncertainty, and anxiety, while Bell gives shareholders increased dividends on profits." Mr. Bibic, this is the human cost of your decision. This is what a real crisis looks like. This young person is watching you today. What's your message to him?
Thank you for that. I mean, that example is just shows how for the individuals directly affected, it's very difficult. And I acknowledge their parents' contribution to Bell and to the company they worked for before that became part of the Bell family, and thank them for that. And I recognize that, when you're directly affected, there is no good process. What I will say, however, is that in terms of the separation package offer.
What about the packages that they're entitled to that they haven't received? I'm sure that your words ring hollow without the severance, let alone the firing.
We would be in compliance with all legal requirements as it relates to the separation packages.
I'm not sure that this was from the most recent round of layoffs, but it appears that is not the case, as it's regardless. It seems that Bell did not live up to its obligations, including in terms of the buyout. I just want to turn to how Canadians are getting ripped off by your company. We know that for example, we know in terms of cell phone service, to put it into perspective, scrolling Instagram in France, for example, for 5 minutes costs about half a cent. But here in Canada, it costs 20 cents. Canadians are getting screwed. And this has everything to do with the oligopoly that you and the other two major telecoms are running in our country. Why do Canadians have to pay some of the highest cell phone rates as you sit back gaining millions of dollars off the backs of Canadian consumers and Canadian workers?
Thank you. I would ask the honourable member to provide to the clerk the case before of the separation package, because if we weren't in compliance with requirements, we will look into it. It's very important. Every individual who departed needs to have their legal separation package, and if
we heard this. Back to the cell phone. My time is limited. Why are you ripping Canadians off when it comes to cell phone costs?
We're providing phenomenal service on world-leading networks at prices that are declining significantly. And I'd encourage all committee members to look at the Indu committee transcript from March 18th, where all the facts are laid out, and they're very compelling.
That Canadians are being ripped off. Thank you.
The time is up. And
a company worth $40 billion, a CEO who last year made $13 million, who at the same time agreed to laying off thousands of workers, 6,000 jobs over an 8-month period, has gutted local news, shut down 45 radio stations, left major centers and smaller centers in our country without the local news that they deserve. In a province like mine, the telecom side of things, we've seen costs go up and service go down. And across the country, Canadian customers are paying some of the highest cell phone rates in the world. How much is enough? How much profit is enough? How much CEO paybacks and profits are enough? How much dividends are enough? This didn't just happen. Bell's approach to a business approach has left Canadians worse off. And it is part of an oligopoly cheerleaded on by Liberals and Conservatives over the years that has sought to make greater and greater profits at the expense of workers, Canadians across the board. What we heard today, right, from the desire to shut down, why we hadn't heard from Bell when we should have heard from Bell, to the fact that it took forever to find out exactly what notice you gave to the federal government. I should note we've since heard that Unifor only found out on February 8th that those layoffs were about to happen. That's not respect. That's not a company that values the workers that work for them. And certainly the cost that Canadians are paying shows that this isn't a company that values what Canadians give to them either. Canadian workers deserve better. First Nations, rural and northern communities like the ones I represent and those across the country that work with Bell deserve better. Canadians who deserve local news told to them by the people based in their communities deserve better. We hope that Bell Media will change course, will rehire workers they've laid off, will reinvest in local broadcasting, will bring down the rates that Canadians deserve. Canadians deserve better, period.